Why did my husband secretly adopt a child without telling me? I came home from a business trip to find a baby in my husband's arms. And no explanation. The house was silent, far too quiet for a Tuesday evening. I just landed back in town after a 4-day marketing conference in Chicago, dragging my suitcase behind me, my head filled with client reports and hotel coffee. When I opened the front door, I expected the soft sound of the TV or maybe my husband humming while cooking dinner. Instead, I heard the gentle coo of an infant. I stopped in the doorway. The lights were low, casting a golden hue across the living room, and there he was, Mark, seated on the couch with a swaddled newborn in his arms. He looked up at me, his eyes blank, like he'd been caught in a trance. "Whose baby is that?" I asked, my voice breaking the quiet like shattered glass. He smiled, soft and strange. "She's ours now." I thought I misheard him. I dropped my bag and approached slowly, every nerve tingling. "What do you mean? Ours?" "Mark, whose baby is this?" He didn't move. "Her name's Layla," he said, brushing his thumb gently across the baby's forehead. "She's ours." My stomach dropped. My world, structured and logical, tipped sideways. We hadn't been trying to have kids. In fact, we'd agreed to revisit the topic next year. There had been no adoption discussions, no agency visits, no fertility plans, and certainly no baby showers or prenatal classes. I crouched beside him and reached out, carefully, to touch the baby's tiny hand. She was warm and real, her fingers curling instinctively around mine. My heart reacted before my mind could catch up. There was a pull, a rush of emotion I hadn't expected. But my confusion drowned it out. "Where did she come from?" I asked again. Mark didn't answer right away. He looked down at Layla, then up at me. "Just trust me." "Okay, she's meant to be with us." I pulled back. "Mark, I need the truth." He stood, still cradling her. "We'll talk. Just not now. She needs to rest." I watched him disappear down the hall into the guest room. The room we once used for out-of-town guests, now transformed with quiet precision into a nursery. The rocking chair, the diapers, the tiny clothes. It had all been arranged in the days I was gone. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I wandered the house in the dark, touching the freshly painted walls of the nursery, staring at the baby monitor blinking softly on the dresser. I tried to tell myself this was some surprise adoption, a spur of the moment decision Mark had somehow made, but my instincts screamed otherwise. By morning, I confronted him again, in the kitchen over cold coffee and toast. "I'm not mad," I told him. "What I need to understand. Where did she come from?" He sighed heavily, rubbing his eyes. "You'll understand soon. It's complicated, then uncomplicated. Still, no real answers, just vague words, assurances without substance." I called my sister, a lawyer, and asked what would be involved if someone tried to adopt a baby without their spouse's knowledge. Her silence on the other end was louder than anything Mark had said. Later that day, I went through his desk. I didn't want to be that wife. Paranoid, snooping, but my hands moved before I could stop them. Inside a locked drawer, I found a manila folder. There was a birth certificate. Layla's. No father's name. No mother's name. Just Layla. And our last name already typed into the adoptive parents' line. Something about it looked wrong. Not fake, necessarily. Just off. There was no agency letterhead, no official seal. And then I found the check stubs. $5,000 to a name I didn't recognize. The pieces began to shift in my mind, forming an ugly picture. This wasn't adoption. This was something else entirely. Mark returned from the store that afternoon, and I confronted him again, folder in hand. "What did you do, Mark?" He looked at the papers in my hands. "I did what I had to." That's not an answer. He sat down slowly, as though the weight of it all had finally settled on his shoulders. "It was never supposed to be like this," he murmured. The silence that followed was unbearable. Layla cried from the other room. Her tiny voice pierced the air like a siren. I went to her, lifted her into my arms. Her weight against my chest was grounding. She smelled like powder and milk. Whatever storm was brewing, she was the eye of it. Peaceful, innocent. And suddenly, terribly, I realized something. Even if Mark was lying, if everything was wrong, this child was real. And now, she was mine, too. I stood in the nursery doorway, holding Layla, watching as my husband avoided my gaze entirely. The questions were only beginning. I didn't sleep the next night either. I lay awake with Layla's soft breathing on the baby monitor, my eyes locked on the ceiling as if it could give me answers. I was still holding on to the thread of hope that maybe, just maybe, Mark would come clean if I gave him space. But by morning, he hadn't. Instead, he made breakfast like everything was normal. Scrambled eggs, toast. He even set out a cup of coffee for me, just the way I liked it. I sat across from him in silence. Then he said it again, as if it was some sacred truth. She's ours now? I blinked. You keep saying that like it means something. Like that phrase makes everything okay? Mark looked up. Because it does. She's with us. That's what matters. No. What matters is how she got here, Mark. You don't just bring home a baby like a pet. He put down his fork and pushed away his plate, frustration flickering in his eyes. I did this for us. You didn't ask me? He stood up, moved toward the living room, then stopped in front of the window like he couldn't bear to look at me. That's not true. You had days. You had weeks. However long this took, you could have called me. He turned around slowly. If I told you, you would have said no. I didn't answer. He was right. If he had called me in Chicago and said, "Hey, I found a baby I think we should raise," I would have told him he was insane. That something was wrong. That this wasn't the way to become a parent, but that didn't make his silence okay. Tell me who she is, I said, quieter now. Tell me who her mother is. He hesitated, then said, that doesn't matter. Yes, it does. She gave her up. That's all you need to know. Did she sign anything? Is this even legal? Mark's jaw tightened. I handled it. That's not an answer. We were shouting now. Layla began to cry, her small voice trembling through the baby monitor. I went to her. I lifted her gently, whispering nonsense into her ear until she calmed down. I cradled her close, rocking slowly. She stared up at me with wide, wondering eyes. When I returned to the kitchen, Mark had left. He didn't take his phone. He didn't leave a note. He just vanished for hours. And I was alone with a baby that wasn't mine, surrounded by diapers, bottles, and a stranger's paperwork. I began to question everything. I opened the trash. Nothing. The laundry, just his shirts and jeans. Then I looked under the sink where we kept old mail and receipts. There, buried behind a stack of outdated coupons, I found a thin blue folder marked Private. Inside were copies of handwritten letters. Pages and pages of them. Addressed to Mark. They weren't love letters. They were desperate. Please, just help me one more time. I don't know where else to go. You promised me after everything, you wouldn't let her end up in the system. The handwriting was messy, like someone had written through tears or shaking hands. The last letter was dated just a week ago. And then I saw the name, Kara. The same name I saw once on Mark's phone a few months ago. A name I hadn't thought much of at the time. He'd dismissed it as a coworker asking for help. But Kara was no coworker. She was Layla's mother. I put everything back and sat down hard on the floor. Mark came home just before sunset. He didn't say anything when he walked in. I didn't either. We just sat there in silence, the hum of the refrigerator and Layla's occasional sleepy murmurs filling the air between us. Finally, he said, she had no one else. I looked at him. Kara? He nodded slowly. She was in trouble. She asked me to take the baby. She didn't want anyone else to know. Why you? Because I owed her. I wanted to scream, to demand what he meant by that. But I knew, instinctively, that this wasn't a one-time favor. This was a thread reaching back years, tangled in guilt and secrecy. She's ours now, he said again. But this time, his voice was barely above a whisper. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because in that moment, I didn't know what worse meant anymore. The next morning, I skipped coffee and made straight for Mark's desk again. I had a feeling that if I didn't find the truth myself, he would continue speaking in circles, hiding behind vague phrases like, I did what I had to, or, you wouldn't understand. What I found was worse than I feared. In the bottom drawer, under a stack of business invoices, I found another folder, thicker, heavier. Inside were documents I hadn't seen before, hospital records, release forms, and adoption paperwork. At first glance, they looked official. But the closer I examined, the more strange details emerged. The signatures were inconsistent. The dates didn't align. One form had Layla's birth, dated 2 weeks before the hospital discharge form. There were no agency stamps, no court approval, nothing with the emblem of a State Department. Just pages that looked cobbled together. And then I saw it, an email printout from an unrecognizable address, K. Shepard 83. Kara's email. Subject line: a final step. No more delays. The body of the email was blunt, Mark, please have the notary signed. I already told them you and your wife agreed. We don't have time to wait. We, them. Mark had told people I'd agreed to this, without me, without even asking. I stared at that single sentence until the words blurred into nonsense. Somewhere between disbelief and rising nausea, I realized I had been written into this narrative, as if my identity, my consent, was nothing more than a convenient name on a form. He forged my signature, maybe not on every line, but enough to make it look like I was a participant in something I didn't even know was happening. And the money. Another set of receipts revealed wire transfers, 3 separate amounts sent to the same account over the past 3 months, 2,500, 3,000, and one for FERS 200 labeled only CarePla housing. They were payments, not donations, not reimbursements. Quiet, off-the-book support for someone in exchange for her child. I confronted Mark again that night, the folder in my lap. I know everything, I said. You paid her. You told people I agreed. You signed forms I never saw. Mark was silent for a long time, standing near the dining room window. The last light of the day framed him in gold and gray. He didn't deny it. I did what I thought was best. For who? I snapped. You. Her. Certainly not for me. He turned, his face tired, older somehow. She was going to give the baby to a foster agency. She was scared, alone. She begged me. And you said yes. I owed her. Stop saying that, I snapped. What do you owe her? What happened? His voice dropped low. Kara and we were friends. Before you and I met, she went through something terrible. I helped her once. And when she got pregnant, she didn't want the father involved. She didn't trust anyone. She remembered me. She thought, maybe we could give the baby a better life. And you didn't think to tell your wife. He finally looked at me. I thought if you saw Layla, you'd fall in love with her. And maybe everything else would fade away. That broke something inside me. Because he wasn't wrong. I had fallen in love with the baby, with her delicate eyelashes and her warmth tucked into my chest. But it didn't excuse the betrayal. Love built on lies isn't love, it's entrapment. You forged my name, I whispered. You made me part of something I didn't choose. I didn't want to lose her. Or you. That was the first time I saw it. The desperation. The fear. Mark wasn't some cold manipulator. He was just weak. He couldn't face saying no to Kara. He couldn't face telling me the truth. So he built a lie and hoped it would carry us all. But lies don't carry, they collapse. I took Layla from her crib that night and rocked her until she fell asleep, her tiny breath warm against my neck. I cried silently, my tears slipping down her blanket. Because the truth was, I did love her. And that made everything harder. Mark slept on the couch that night. Neither of us said goodnight. The house, once a place of peace, was now a museum of deception. The forged papers, the whispered emails, the money, all of it wrapped around us like a second skin we couldn't shed. And yet, Layla's soft cooing in the early morning reminded me she didn't ask for any of this. She was the only innocent one here. 2 days later, I drove to the hospital. It was an impulse decision, made after another long, quiet morning of cold cereal and colder silence between Mark and me. I told him I needed air. He didn't ask questions. He just nodded, staring down at Layla like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to this world. I didn't tell him where I was going. I remembered the name of the hospital from the forged documents. St. Bernadette's. A small maternity hospital about 40 minutes from our home. One I'd never had a reason to visit. I arrived just before noon, walking past the reception with a calm, purposeful air, hoping that if I looked like I belonged, no one would question me. The maternity ward was on the 2nd floor. The hallways smelled of antiseptic and soft powder, a clean contrast to the emotional mess I carried with me. I scanned every face, nurses, doctors, new mothers, looking for someone who might recognize me, or him. I approached the nurse's station and waited until one of them looked up. She was older, with silver streaks through her hair and a no-nonsense energy. Hi, I said, steadying my voice. I'm looking for some information about a recent birth. A baby girl named Layla, born about 2 weeks ago. She tilted her head. Are you family? I'm her adoptive mother, I think. I'm trying to confirm some details. There's been some confusion. The nurse's eyebrows pinched together. Let me check something. Wait here. She disappeared behind a partition. A few minutes passed. Then she returned, but not alone. Behind her stood another nurse, tall, thin, with soft eyes that looked familiar in a way I couldn't explain. "I'm Diane," the second nurse said. "You asked about Layla." I nodded. She studied me for a moment. "You were here before, weren't you?" The question sent a chill down my spine. "No," I said quietly. "That wasn't me." Her face shifted. "Well, someone who looked a lot like you was here. With a man. Dark hair, blue jacket. He was very insistent about taking the baby home." I swallowed. "Her mother. Here too." Diane's voice softened. "Yes, poor thing. She was all alone, had a rough labor. No visitors except that man." My heart pounded. "What was her name?" She hesitated. "I really shouldn't say." "Please," I begged. "I think my husband lied to me about all of this. I'm just trying to understand the truth." A pause. Then, Kara Shepherd. "So it was real. All of it. She didn't want to keep the baby?" I asked. She went back and forth. She was scared. But when she left, she didn't sign the final release papers. I remember because I had to call it in. That stopped me cold. She didn't sign. "No," Diane said. "She changed her mind at the last minute. Told us she needed more time. Said she wanted to speak to Mark again. I'm guessing that's your husband." I nodded slowly, the air thick in my lungs. "She left without the baby." Diane continued. "But we didn't place her. We were waiting on a judge to settle the paperwork. It was unusual, honestly. So how did the baby end up with us?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Diane hesitated. "Someone came back the next morning. Claimed the mother had approved it privately. They had a folder with signatures. We didn't check." She looked away, guilt flickering in her expression. "That man, he was very convincing." I didn't speak. I couldn't. I walked out of the hospital in a daze, every step echoing in my head like a gavel. Kara hadn't signed. She'd hesitated. And yet the baby was in our home, in our care, because Mark had returned with falsified permission, carrying a forged folder and enough confidence to bluff an entire hospital. He had stolen that baby. That night, I didn't confront him. Not yet. I watched him instead as he fed Layla, rocking her in the same chair where I'd found him days earlier. He looked gentle, quietly devoted. He sang a low lullaby under his breath, something his mother used to sing, he once told me. It struck me that he loved her deeply, truly, in his own twisted, misguided way. And somehow, that made it worse, because he wasn't some villain. He was a man so desperate to fix a past mistake that he'd created a new one. Later, while he slept, I sat in the nursery alone, holding Layla and whispering promises to her in the dark. "I don't know how this ends," I said softly, "but I won't let anyone hurt you." And I meant it. No matter how we got here, no matter how badly this began, I had already chosen her, even if that meant choosing her over him. The receipt was what finally cracked everything open. Mark had left his coat draped over the dining chair again, something he always did when he was preoccupied. I was cleaning up Layla's bottles from the drying rack when it slipped to the floor. As I picked it up, something crinkled in the pocket. A parking receipt. Not unusual, but it wasn't from the grocery store or his office. It was from a public garage on Melrose Avenue, near the west end of town. I knew that area. Not much there, but a few old apartment buildings, a gas station, and a daycare center. I waited until Friday. I told Mark I needed a few hours for myself, and he nodded, seemingly grateful I wasn't asking questions. I left him with Layla and drove across town, that receipt clutched in my coat pocket like a passport to a hidden world. Melrose Avenue was quieter than I expected. I parked a block away and walked toward the address listed on the slip. Apartment 3B. The building was older, brick facade, narrow windows, ivy curling up one side. I hesitated in the hallway, my breath catching in my throat as I stared at the door. I knocked once. The sound of slow footsteps approached. A few seconds later, it opened. A woman stood there, early 30s maybe, slender, pale, eyes rimmed with deep circles like she hadn't slept in days. She didn't look surprised to see me. She looked ashamed. "Kara?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "You're his wife." It wasn't a question. I didn't speak. I just stood there, trying to match the image in my mind of the woman who had written those frantic letters, who had carried Layla, who had pleaded with Mark for help, with the fragile, exhausted figure in front of me. "Can I come in?" I asked. Kara stepped aside and I walked into the tiny apartment. It smelled of microwave dinners and old lavender. A single blanket was folded neatly on the couch. An empty crib stood against one wall, unused, untouched. I thought you should know, she said, sitting down without being asked. I didn't want it to go this far. I sat across from her. She spoke softly, like each word carried a weight she could barely lift. I wasn't supposed to keep her. That's what I told myself. That's what I told Mark. But after she was born, I had changed my mind. She looked up at me. I asked him to give me time, just a few more days. But he panicked. He said you gave permission. I never signed anything. He said if I didn't act fast, she'd end up in a state facility, that someone would take her. I don't know. I was scared. I trusted him. Why did you come to him? Her eyes filled. Because he was there for me once. Years ago, after something terrible happened. He helped me when no one else would. We weren't lovers. Not really. But there was connection. He told me if I ever needed anything at all, I could come to him. So you came. And now you have my daughter. I felt the tears before I realized I was crying. Kara didn't reach for a tissue. She just stared at the wall, her voice flattening. I didn't fight it at first. I thought, maybe it was better. But then I started having nightmares. Waking up thinking I heard her cry. Calling her name in my sleep. My neighbor came over one night because I was screaming so loud. She paused. I went to the hospital. They said I needed counseling. But I can't afford it. And I can't go back to work yet. I can't even walk by the baby aisle at the store. I nodded slowly. I need to know, she said suddenly, turning to me with a tremble in her voice. Is she okay? Is she happy? I didn't have to think. She's more than okay. She's safe. Loved. Kara exhaled, a long, jagged breath that sounded like a lifetime of held back grief. I'm not trying to take her, she said. I just needed to know. I believed her. But as I drove home, her words circled in my head like storm clouds. She wasn't trying to take her. Not now. But what about later? What if she changed her mind again? And what would happen to us? Me, Mark, Layla, if everything came crashing down. Mark was in the kitchen when I got back, bottle in hand, Layla dozing in his arms. He looked up at me like a child who knew he was caught, but didn't know what to do with the guilt. I didn't speak. I just watched him. And for the first time, I truly saw him, not as the man I married, but as the one who built a family out of desperation and lies, and the woman he'd left in his wake. The journal was buried beneath the crib, folded flat and wrapped in a pink baby blanket I hadn't seen before. I found it by accident. Layla had dropped her pacifier between the crib slats, and as I reached to retrieve it, I saw the fabric poking out. It was small, leather-bound, with frayed edges and the name, Kara, written faintly on the inside cover. The first few pages were blank, but then the ink began. Thin, trembling handwriting etched onto each page with aching precision. I sat down on the nursery floor and began to read. Day 1 sees she's kicking so much now. It hurts sometimes, but I don't care. I think she knows I'm scared. Day 12 Mark called today. He says he'll help. I want to believe him. I have to believe him. Day 19 the nightmares are back. Same one every time. She's crying, and I can't find her. I wake up screaming. The entries were sporadic, some no longer than a few lines. Others were pages long, spilling raw emotion, regret, and longing across the paper. They painted a picture not of a reckless mother abandoning her child, but of a woman drowning desperate to find air. Day 27 I don't want to give her up. A broken woman in a broken apartment. Day 31 I saw Mark's wife once. Online. She looks strong, responsible, the kind of mother I wish I could be. My hands shook as I turned each page. She'd been watching me, imagining me, not with malice, but with a kind of fragile hope that I could be what she couldn't, that I might love her child enough to make the pain mean something. Day 39 he said she doesn't need to know everything, that it's better if she believes the papers are clean. I'm not sure I agree, but I can't do this alone. Day 42 I want to meet her, just once, but Mark says no. He says she wouldn't understand. I pressed the book against my chest, heart pounding. She wanted to meet me. She wanted me to know. He had blocked her, silenced her. There was one more entry, written in rushed, slanted handwriting. Day 44 I changed my mind. I can't go through with it. I didn't sign. He said he would fix it, but I didn't mean that. I just needed more time. Please don't hate me if you ever read this. I never wanted to disappear. I just didn't know how to stay. I closed the journal slowly. A quiet numbness settled over me, like the moment after a storm when the sky is too still. Everything I'd suspected was true. Mark hadn't just missold me. He had manipulated Kara, twisted her vulnerability into silent consent, convinced her that disappearing was the only path left. He had chosen to keep us both in the dark, feeding each of us only the version of the story that served his fragile illusion. And now I had her words in my hands. Proof of everything. That night, I placed the journal on Mark's pillow. He found it before bed, read it in silence. Then he came to the nursery where I was rocking Layla, her breathing soft and even. "I didn't know she wrote that," he said. I didn't look at him. "She wanted you to tell me?" I said. "I know. She didn't sign." He nodded. "I know." I turned to face him. "Do you even realize what you did? You didn't just lie to me. You lied to her. You broke both of us." Mark sat down on the edge of the room, elbows on his knees. "I thought I was saving her. Saving Layla. I didn't think it would unravel like this." "That's the problem," I said. "You didn't think." There was a long pause. Then, quietly, "Do you love her?" I looked down at the child in my arms. "I don't know if I have a right to, but I do." Mark nodded slowly. "I didn't want to lose you." "You already did." He stood after that, said nothing, walked out. And for the first time, I didn't follow him, because something had shifted. The illusion was gone. The only thing left now was the truth, raw, sharp, and irreversible. The next morning, he was waiting at the kitchen table. I entered the room cautiously, still unsure whether I was prepared for another confrontation or if I had anything left to say. Mark looked different, his usual morning fog replaced by a clarity I hadn't seen in weeks. His hands were folded, the journal resting between them like a confession offered at an altar. "I didn't cheat on you," he said, his voice low but firm. I didn't respond. I pulled out the chair opposite him and sat down. "Not once," he continued. "There was never anything physical between me and Kara. Not then. Not now." There it was again. That phrase. "You keep saying that," I said. "Explain it. Make it make sense." He took a deep breath. "Years ago, I was the one who got her out of an abusive relationship. She was in trouble. Broke, bruised, hiding in her sister's basement. I helped her get a lawyer, paid for her to relocate. I visited a few times, just checked in. We talked. Nothing happened between us, but I think she clung to me. I was the only one who hadn't left her. So you felt responsible." He nodded. "We lost touch eventually. Then, one night, out of nowhere, she called, said she was pregnant, said she had no one. The father was gone. Her sister had moved. She didn't want the baby to grow up the way she did. And she asked you to take her child?" "At first, just to help her find options. She was going to give the baby up. She'd made peace with it," she said. "But then, when she went into labor, she panicked. Said she couldn't trust strangers. She begged me to take the baby. And you said yes?" I thought I could handle it. I thought I could give her peace and you something beautiful. I convinced myself it was a gift for both of you." I looked at him, barely able to believe what I was hearing. "You thought bringing home a baby without telling your wife would be a gift." He flinched. "I thought I could explain it after. Once you met her. Once you saw her." I stood, unable to sit still. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing inward. "You didn't trust me," I said. "You trusted Kara more than your own wife." Mark looked down. "She was drowning. I couldn't let her go under again. So instead, you dragged us both under." I walked over to the window, needing distance. "And the papers. The forged documents." He swallowed hard. "She wouldn't sign. She panicked," like I said. "I told her I'd find another way. I thought if I could just get Layla out of the hospital, get her somewhere safe, everything else would fall into place. But nothing has fallen into place," I said. "You didn't save anyone, Mark. You lied to everyone. You manipulated her. You betrayed me." He stood slowly. "I know, and I'll accept whatever consequences come. But please," his voice broke, "please don't make Layla suffer for my mistakes." I turned to face him, and for the first time, I saw the full weight of guilt pressing down on him. He wasn't hiding anymore. He wasn't defending himself. He was just broken. He loved Layla. I never doubted that. But love wasn't enough, not when it was built on deception. That night, we agreed to separate. Temporarily, we said, to figure things out. He moved into the guest room. We alternated nights with Layla. Her routine didn't change. Bottles, lullabies, bedtime stories. But the air between us was heavy with unspoken truths. And in the quiet moments, I found myself whispering apologies to her. For the mess. For the confusion. For the strange beginnings that brought her to us. One night, while rocking her to sleep, I felt her tiny fingers wrap around mine and stay there. As if she knew. As if she forgave me. It wasn't a miracle. It wasn't healing. But it was a beginning. Becoming a mother under a shadow is unlike anything I ever imagined. In the early days after the truth came out, I tried to settle into a rhythm with Layla. Feedings every 3 hours, diaper changes, lullabies I hummed with shaky breath. Outwardly, it all looked normal. Friends who visited smiled at the soft pink nursery, complimented her eyes, and asked how we were adjusting. But I couldn't say what I really felt. That I was raising a child who had been passed to me like a secret. That another woman's scent still clung to the baby blanket, folded at the foot of the crib. That every moment of joy I felt. Layla's first smile, her laugh, the soft way her hand gripped my finger, was tinged with guilt. Because I wasn't just her mother, I was her mother instead of someone else. Kara's name lingered in everything. In the lullaby she once wrote about in her journal. In the sleep schedule she'd created before ever holding her daughter. In the pink dress I found tucked into the diaper bag Mark had brought home. Something I hadn't bought. That dress must have been Kara's. Some days, I would hold Layla and try to imagine the woman who gave birth to her. What her voice sounded like. Whether she cried when she handed her daughter over. Whether she still woke up at night, aching from emptiness. I never asked Mark if she had tried to see Layla again. I didn't want to know. But motherhood is relentless, even when it begins with betrayal. Layla demanded love in the way only babies can, without shame, without apology. And I gave it to her, piece by piece, even as the rest of my life unraveled. Mark remained in the house, sleeping in the guest room. We rarely spoke unless it was about Layla's feeding or doctor's appointments. His presence hovered, like a ghost from the life I thought we had. One evening, I found him asleep in the nursery rocker, Layla in his arms. They looked peaceful, the way I once dreamed our family might look. But it only deepened the achy, because now I knew the cost of that picture. And it wasn't just mine to carry. One day, while folding laundry, I noticed Mark had left his phone unlocked on the kitchen counter. A message flashed on the screen. Karat, I'm not going to ask again. I need to see her. My chest tightened, so she had asked. Repeatedly, it seemed. I didn't read the rest. I simply turned off the screen and walked away. I confronted him later that night, after Layla had gone to sleep. She's still reaching out. He nodded slowly. Yeah, and you haven't told me. What would it change? He asked. It changes everything, I snapped. She's not a memory. She's a person. She exists. She's hurting. And we're pretending she never mattered. Mark sat down heavily on the couch. I didn't know how to tell you, he said. Every time she messages me, it rips open the guilt again. That's not a reason to hide it, I said. That's just another excuse. There was a long pause between us. Then he asked something I hadn't expected. Do you want to meet her? I froze. The idea made my heart race, a confusing mix of fear, curiosity, and dread. I don't know, I said. What if she wants Layla back? She's not asking for that. Not yet. We sat in silence, both staring at the baby monitor blinking softly in the dark. I feel like a thief, I whispered. Even though I love her. Even though I never asked for this. Mark didn't respond. He didn't need to, because he had made me a mother by deception. And now, every lullaby I sang echoed with someone else's silence. But still, I sang them. Because Layla was here, and someone had to love her, fully and without regret. Even if that love was born in the shadow of another woman's heartbreak. It happened on a Tuesday night, just after 10 p.m. I had just settled Layla down in her crib, her breathing soft and even, her little hand curled near her cheek. Mark was in the guest room, the door slightly ajar, a pale blue light from the television flickering against the hallway wall. I was halfway through brushing my teeth when the doorbell rang. Once, then again, faster, urgent. At first, I thought maybe it was a neighbor, or someone delivering a package by mistake. But as I stepped into the hallway, a knock followed, loud and sharp, not friendly. I glanced at Mark's door. He appeared behind me, startled. Who is that? He whispered. I didn't answer. I moved to the door slowly, heart pounding, and peered through the peephole. It was Kara. She looked pale and frantic, her hair pulled back hastily, her eyes red and wide. She was holding something in one hand. Papers maybe. But it was the other hand, clenched into a trembling fist, that made my stomach twist. I opened the door halfway, keeping the chain latched. Kara. I need to see her, she said quickly, her breath fogging the cool night air. Please. Just for a minute. I've been trying to call. He hasn't responded. Mark stepped up behind me. Kara, he said softly like a warning. But she pushed forward, gripping the edge of the door. Don't Kara me, Mark. You told me I'd get a say. That this would be open, that I'd get to see her. You lied to me. Her voice cracked. I just want to hold my daughter. I closed my eyes. Behind me, Layla stirred lightly in the monitor, a gentle whimper. She was still asleep, but it was as if she could feel the tension, the storm gathering at the front door. You can't come in like this, I said, more gently than I thought possible. Not at night. Not unannounced. This isn't the way. I'm her mother, Kara whispered. I carried her for 9 months. I fed her, sang to her. Do you even know what I went through? I do, I said. I've read your journal. That stopped her. Her face crumpled. I wasn't supposed to disappear, she whispered, her voice shattering. I didn't want to. He made it seem like it was too late. That if I came back, it would ruin everything. She looked at me now, not Mark. I'm not here to steal her, she said. I just want to see her. To know she's real, that she's okay. Mark opened the door wider. I stepped in front of him. No, I said firmly. Not like this. You're emotional. It's late. Layla's asleep. If we're going to talk about anything, visitation, custody, we do it properly. With lawyers, with agreements, not in the middle of the night. Kara stared at me, and then she broke. She sank to the porch steps and began to sob, loud, aching sobs that seemed to come from a place so deep, so devastated, it felt wrong to witness it. Mark sat beside her, said nothing, just let her cry. I stood in the doorway for a long moment before quietly shutting the door. I returned to the nursery and sat beside the crib, watching Layla breathe. Outside, I could still hear Kara's cries. I didn't hate her. I couldn't. She was a mother in agony, pushed to the margins of her own story, and part of me, no matter how much I resisted it, knew that I was living the life she had given up in desperation. When Kara finally left, Mark returned inside wordlessly. We didn't speak that night, but something had shifted. The boundary between Ors and Urs was broken now, and I didn't know how to repair it. The court summons arrived a week later. A thin envelope slipped into our mailbox, marked with the county's seal. I opened it alone at the kitchen counter, the baby monitor buzzing softly beside me. Layla was napping. Mark was out for groceries. Inside was the petition, Kara Shepard v. Mark and K. my name. The title stung. She was filing for parental rights. There were no threats of full custody, at least not yet. But the words, visitation, temporary guardianship, and pending DNA confirmation, leapt off the page like fire. I held the paper tightly, my knuckles whitening as I scanned the legal phrases that now defined the child I'd bathed, rocked, sung to sleep. We had 10 days to respond. When Mark returned, I laid the envelope in front of him. She's not letting go, I said. He read it quietly. No outburst. No defense. She shouldn't, he finally said. I turned sharply. You think she should have her? No. I think she should fight for her if she believes she can't live without her. Any mother would. It was the most honest thing he'd said in weeks. We hired a lawyer the next morning. Separate counsel, though we presented a united front in court. Our attorney advised us to cooperate, to be honest, and, above all, to show consistency. Judges favor stability in cases like this, she said. Don't get emotional. Show your commitment. But emotions were inevitable. At the first hearing, Kara sat across from us in a plain blue dress, her hands folded in her lap. She looked thinner, older, tired in a way that suggested her soul hadn't rested in months. When the judge asked her to explain her position, her voice trembled but did not break. I gave her up under pressure, she said. I didn't understand the consequences. I never signed a final consent. I asked for time, and she looked at Mark. He took that choice away. Mark didn't interrupt. Neither did I. When it was my turn, I stood slowly. I didn't know, I said. If I had known she hadn't consented, I never would have accepted custody. I was misled, but once Layla was in my arms, I became her mother. I didn't plan it. But I've never loved anything more. The judge nodded, taking notes. Our lawyer recommended supervised visitation as a compromise, 1 hour a week in a neutral facility. Kara accepted with quiet tears. The DNA test confirmed Kara's maternity, though no father was listed. That worked in our favor. It simplified legal options, kept the case focused on the two maternal figures locked in this tangled triangle. Still, the courtroom became a stage for every mistake. Mark's decisions, Kara's silence, my delayed awakening to the truth. The judge requested psychological evaluations. I sat through mine in a small office with pale green walls, holding a tissue as I described the disintegration of trust in my marriage and the strange way motherhood had arrived. I didn't ask for this, I told the evaluator. But I will fight to keep her, because I can't imagine life without her now. Weeks passed in limbo. Layla continued to grow, gaining weight, smiling more, babbling with new sounds each morning. To her, the world was simple: a soft crib, warm milk, a song before sleep. To the adults around her, it was war, quiet, civil, but war all the same. The second court appearance came 6 weeks later. This time, Kara asked to speak directly. I don't want to destroy her life, she said, glancing toward me. But I want to be in it. I want her to know who I am. Not because I carried her, but because I still love her. Every day, the judge nodded slowly. Then we'll start with a supervised plan, he said, and revisit in 6 months. Afterward, in the hallway outside the courtroom, Kara approached me. Thank you, she said. For what? For not shutting me out completely. I know you could have. I don't know what I would have done if you had. I looked into her eyes, so different from mine, but filled with the same ache. I don't know what this is supposed to look like, I said. But Layla deserves more than secrecy and shame. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. But for the first time, we saw each other as something more than rivals. We were two women, bound by the same child, and neither of us wanted to lose her. After the second hearing, something in Mark broke for good. It wasn't a loud collapse, no shouting, no angry gestures, just a quiet fading, like a photograph left too long in the sun. He withdrew from everything, not just from me, but from Layla too. At first, I thought it was stress. Depression, maybe. He'd been carrying the weight of his choices for months, and now they were bearing consequences in a courtroom. But then the withdrawal became habit. He stopped attending the supervised visits with Kara. He missed Layla's first tooth coming in, a milestone I celebrated alone with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. When Layla babbled her first, "Mama," he was in the next room and didn't stir. Once, I left her with him for 20 minutes while I ran to the pharmacy. When I returned, she was crying in her crib, and he hadn't moved from the couch. I asked him if he was okay. He nodded. That was all I got. In the evenings, I'd see him sitting in the dark, staring at the journal Kara had once written. He never said what he read, but I knew he was looking for redemption in those pages. Proof that what he did wasn't unforgivable, but redemption doesn't live on paper. It lives in actions. And his were vanishing. I tried to reach him. Mark, she still needs you. Layla doesn't understand any of this. She just wants her father. She has you, he said without looking up. That's not the point. He stood up then, walked into the guest room, and shut the door. Not slammed, just closed, gently, as if saying goodbye without saying a word. A week later, he packed a suitcase. I'm gonna stay with my brother for a while, he told me. I need space. I need to think. About what? He looked at me, his eyes sunken and dull. About whether I'm even supposed to be in her life anymore. I wanted to scream at him, to ask how he could bring this child into our world. How he could lie to two women, forge signatures, and tear down everything we'd built, only to now walk away like it was too heavy to hold. But I didn't scream. I didn't have the energy. Instead, I nodded. If you leave, I said, you don't get to come and go when it's convenient. If you walk out now, you need to understand what that means. He hesitated at the door. I already do, he whispered. And then he was gone. For the first time in months, the house felt still. No pacing footsteps. No whispered phone calls behind closed doors. Just me and Layla alone. And yet, oddly, more whole than we'd been in weeks. I poured all my attention into her. Into preparing her bottles, reading her stories, holding her for hours when her gums ached and she cried into my shoulder. I kept records for court, coordinated with Kara's visitation schedule, and filled notebooks with feeding times and sleep patterns. Mark didn't call. He didn't write. He didn't send money or updates, or even text to ask how Layla was doing. It was like he had vanished. dissolving into the consequences he'd spent months trying to outrun. And still, Layla grew. Her first real laugh came during a visit to the park. She sat on a picnic blanket and giggled as the wind tousled her hair. Kara was there too, seated a few feet away, carefully observing, occasionally making a face to earn another chuckle. We didn't talk much that day. But at one point, Kara turned to me and said, "He hasn't answered me either." I nodded. "I don't think he knows who he is anymore." Kara sighed. "Maybe he never did." It wasn't bitterness, just acceptance. Later that night, I found one of Mark's old sweaters in the laundry basket. I almost washed it, then stopped. I held it to my face. It didn't smell like him anymore. It smelled like dust, like absence. And that's what he had become, a presence erased by silence. Not by death, not by distance, but by choice. And I had to be okay with that. For Layla, for myself, for the life we were still building, one honest step at a time. 1 year later, the house was quieter, cleaner. Layla had grown into a bright, inquisitive toddler. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity, her hands constantly exploring. She had begun to walk with wobbly confidence, babbling words that only I could fully interpret. She called me Mama, now with clarity and intent. And every time, it echoed like a hymn in my soul. Mark never came back. He never answered my messages or responded to the official letters from the court. At first, I waited, expecting at least a token gesture, birthday gifts, a letter, a phone call, but none came. After the 3rd month of silence, I stopped expecting. By the 6th, I began legal steps to secure sole custody. The process was painful but necessary. The judge needed to see a consistent timeline, evidence that I had been the sole caregiver, and that Mark had abandoned his legal responsibilities. It wasn't hard to prove. There were no visits, no financial support, no contact whatsoever. Kara supported my petition. She showed up in court, dressed simply, with her long hair pinned back and her hands folded gently in her lap. "She is in a stable, loving home," she said when asked. "I believe the petitioner has acted in Layla's best interests, and I no longer wish to pursue shared custody." Her words landed with more power than I expected. Even the judge paused to acknowledge the grace with which she had stepped aside. Outside the courthouse, I approached her. "Why did you change your mind?" I asked. Kara gave me a sad smile, because I realized that love doesn't always mean claiming what you've lost. Sometimes, it means letting go of what you can't hold. I didn't have words for that. Just tears. "I still want to be part of her life," she said. "If you'll let me?" "I will," I promised. And I meant it. We worked out an informal agreement. Visits once a month, sometimes more if Layla asked. Kara never pushed. She never brought gifts too large or stories too complicated. She came with quiet affection, folding gently into the rhythm of our little family without disrupting it. She became an aunt of sorts, and I found myself grateful for her presence, grateful that Layla would one day understand how many people had loved her from the very beginning, even when none of us knew how to love each other properly. There were hard days, of course. Nights when Layla cried for reasons she couldn't explain. Questions I wasn't ready to answer. About her father, her beginnings, the shadows I had tried so hard to illuminate with honesty. But we were okay. More than okay. One evening, after Layla had fallen asleep with her arms wrapped around her favorite, stuffed giraffe, I sat in the nursery and scrolled through old photos. I found one from the week she arrived, her face barely visible, my own smile forced and uncertain. Then I opened the camera app and snapped a new photo of her sleeping. She looked so peaceful now, like someone who had finally found home. And I realized something. I had too. Not the home I'd once imagined, built with Mark through shared plans and shared dreams, but a different kind of home, resilient, honest, and fiercely mine. A few weeks later, I finalized the paperwork. Layla's legal name was updated. Custody, full and irrevocable, granted solely to me. And with that, I closed the chapter on the life I had shared with Mark. Not with rage, not with bitterness, just a quiet understanding that he had written himself out of our story. And I wasn't going to keep waiting for him to return. I was writing new pages now. Pages filled with bedtime kisses, morning laughter, and the soft weight of a child who had become mine, not by blood but by fire. Years passed, gently and quietly. Layla grew into a graceful, curious girl with wide eyes and an even wider imagination. She loved music, especially lullabies, and she insisted I sing to her every night, long after most children had outgrown the need. Sometimes she'd ask, "Did you sing this to me when I was a baby?" And I'd nod, because I did, even when I didn't know how to love properly yet. Even when the guilt still sat on my chest like an invisible stone. By the time she was 5, the questions began to change. Mama, where's Daddy? I had rehearsed this moment in my head 100 times. Every variation. Every version. I thought I'd know exactly what to say. But when it came, I just held her close. He had to go away, I said softly. He didn't know how to be a daddy. She looked up at me with quiet understanding. More wisdom in her little face than I deserved. Oh, she said, but you stayed. I kissed her forehead, blinking back tears. Always. And that was enough, for now. Kara remained a presence in our lives, a quiet, careful presence she never overstepped. She came to birthday parties with small, meaningful gifts and brought coloring books and soft, spoken stories about her garden or her cat. As Layla grew older, Kara told her pieces of the truth in ways that didn't shatter anything. You grew in my belly, but your mommy grew in your heart, she'd say. And Layla would nod, accepting it as fact, as a child who understood love as something flexible, fluid, and abundant. At 8, Layla wrote a story for school titled, My Two Mommies. She drew stick figures, one tall with glasses, me, and one with long hair and a watering can's carafe. In the center was herself, arms stretched to both sides, smiling wide. Her teacher called me in, smiling. She seems really happy, really secure. She is, I said. She's deeply loved. There were times I'd sit in the living room at night, holding a cup of tea, watching her sleep on the baby monitor just like I used to. And I'd think about the house she came into, the lies, the forged documents, the panic, the grief. But mostly, I'd think about the little girl sleeping upstairs, safe, loved, and surrounded by women who had learned how to coexist not through perfection, but through forgiveness. Mark never came back. Over time, even the pain of that began to dull. I no longer checked old emails or phone records. I no longer imagined what I'd say to him if he showed up one day with excuses or regrets. I didn't need closure from him, because I had built it myself, brick by honest brick. I once thought that family was something you planned, something you crafted like a house from blueprints and deliberate decisions. But now I knew the truth. Family is often made in the aftermath, in the ashes of what should have been, in the healing, in the love that chooses to stay, again and again, even after being tested. Layla is mine, not by birth, not by paperwork, but by every long night, every question answered with trembling honesty, every moment I stood when I could have run. She calls me Mom, not because I demanded it, but because in her heart I am, and in mine she always will be. These are stories that show the consequences and limits of family relationships. Sometimes the lines between right and wrong, parent and stranger, protector and betrayer blur into shades of gray. But what remains clear is this: love alone does not excuse deception, and truth, while painful, is the foundation on which healing must be built. To the mothers who stayed and the ones who let go, your choices, however messy, are not forgotten. To my listeners, what about you? Have you ever had to choose between love and honesty in your family? Share your story in the comments. And if this tale moved you, please subscribe for more real, haunting journeys through the hidden layers of family life.